Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode of Smooth Brain EDH, where we make the smoothest plays with the biggest brains. Today we've got some new casual gameplay for you, and featuring a new player. Everybody give a warm welcome to Sam. Alright, now let's jump straight into who's playing what and their opening hands. Up first we have Shelby and his Shalai Voice of Plenty deck. This deck is a green-white creature deck, with a sub-theme in Angels. He's also running a lot of utility and value enchantments. His main win con is Beatdown. His starting hand has 2 plains, a forest, Lightning Greaves, Wild Pair, Lyra Dawnbringer, and Angelic Arbiter. Up next we have Sam playing his Sisay Weatherlight Captain deck. His specific deck is the Shrines variant. For those of you who don't know, Shrines are an enchantment subtype that are legendary and synergize very well with each other. The more shrines you have, the more powerful they become. But seeing as there are only 11 shrines at the time of this recording, he can't exactly fill his entire deck with them, so it runs a bunch of other enchantments and enchantment shenanigans. His opening hand has an island, plains, forest, Sandstep Citadel, Rampant Growth, Destiny Spinner, and a Paradox Haze. Up next we have Justin, who's playing his Alesha Who Smiles at Death deck. This deck is a Mardu Creatures deck, specifically a human tribal deck. Its main plan is to get as much value as it can from its low-powered creatures, and if they die, Alesha can bring them back from the graveyard. His starting hand consists of a Swamp, a Plains, Sacred Foundry, Unclaimed Territory, a Skull Clamp, a Bastion of Remembrance, and a Palace Jailer. And up last we have Ethan playing his Omnath Locus of Creation deck. This high synergy deck tries to get as much value as possible off cards that benefit off lands entering the battlefield, and it can really get going sometimes. He keeps a starting hand of Wooded Foothills, Steam Vents, Sacred Foundry, Crop Rotation, Cultivate, Sakura Tribe Scout, and Meluku, the Clouded Mirror. Alright you guys, we've seen who's playing and their starting hands. But before we get started, I have one question for you. Who do you think's gonna win? Leave it in the comments down below. It looks like Justin wins the die roll. He plays a tap Sacred Foundry and passes. Shelby plays a Plains, taps for 1, and casts a top deck Sarah Ascendant before passing to Sam. Sam plays a tap Sandstep Citadel and passes to Ethan. Ethan plays a Wooded Foothills, fetches for an untapped Breeding Pool, casts Sakura Tribe Scout, and passes to Justin while he's searching. Justin plays an Exotic Orchard and passes to Shelby. Shelby plays a Forest, then taps for 2 to cast his Lightning Greaves. He free equips him to his Ascendant and starts swinging around the table, starting with Sam, who takes 6. He then passes, and on his turn, Sam plays a Forest, taps for 2, and casts a Rampant Growth, finding a tapped mountain to the battlefield. And he lets Ethan have his turn while he's searching. Ethan shocks in a Steam Vents, and then taps his Sakura Tribe Scout to put in a Sacred Foundry, also shocking it in. He then taps for 3 to cast Cultivate. This dude is ramping. He finds a Forest to the battlefield tapped and an island to his hand. He then passes to Justin, who plays a Swamp, and then casts a Bastion of Remembrance. Justin then passes to Shelby. Shelby starts his turn off with a Plains as land for turn. He then moves to combat and bonks Ethan for 6. After that, he passes to Sam. Sam plays an island as land for turn, then casts a Destiny Spinner before passing to Ethan. Ethan plays his island as land for turn, then taps for 4 to cast Omnath, drawing a card off the ETB trigger. He then taps his Forest and casts Crop Rotation, sacrificing said Forest. He finds a Fabled Passage and gains 4 life when it enters the battlefield. He sacrifices it to find a snow-covered forest, getting 4 mana. He then uses 3 of this mana to cast a Tireless Tracker. Not done yet, he taps Sakura Tribe Scout to put in Field of the Dead. Omnath triggers, everyone takes 4, and he investigates. And with that 1 floating mana and 1 land untapped, he sacrifices his Clue token before passing to Justin. Justin plays an Unclaimed Territory, naming Humans. He then taps for 4 to cast a Dusk, destroying all creatures with power 3 or greater. Justin then swings 1 at Shelby before passing. Shelby unfortunately misses a land drop and just passes to Sam. Sam plays a Plains as land for turn, taps for 5, 1 of each mana, and casts Sanctum of All. He passes to Ethan after this. Ethan starts his turn off with a Zendikar's Royal. After this, he plays a Snow-Covered Forest, getting a 2/2. He then taps for 2 to cast Farseek. He finds the Jeskai Triome with it, and this time Field of the Dead triggers too. After this, he passes to Justin. Justin plays a Plains as land for turn, then taps for 4 to cast a Molten Echoes. Can you guess what creature type he chooses? He plays out a Skull Clamp after this and passes to Shelby. Shelby unfortunately misses another land drop, but does get a card he's able to cast with Rest in Peace. He passes to Sam after this. On his upkeep, Sam is able to find a Honden of Knight's Reach with Sanctum of All. And I apologize for the glare. He plays a forest as land for turn, and then taps to cast Paradox Haze, enchanting himself. He then casts a Sterling Grove, swings for 2 at Shelby, and then passes to Ethan. Ethan moves straight to combat, swinging a 2/2 at everyone. Sam and Shelby take it, and Justin blocks with his 1/1 soldier, causing everybody to lose a life, and he gains 1. After combat, Ethan taps for 6 and recasts Omnath, drawing a card to the ETB trigger. He then plays a Prismatic Vista, gaining 4 life and making 2 more 2/2s. He then just passes to Justin. Justin plays another Plains as land for turn, then taps for 5 to cast Cleansing Nova, making the bold decision to destroy all artifacts and enchantments. He then passes to Shelby. Shelby unfortunately does miss another land drop, but he does get to cast a Blind Obedience before passing to Sam. Sam plays the Temur Triome tapped as land for turn, and then decides to cast his commander, Sisay. He then casts a Font of Fertility, and then passes to Ethan, and on his end step, Ethan activates Sakura Tribe Scout, putting in a Bloodstained Mire. He makes 2 more 2/2s and gains 4 life. Now on his turn, Ethan moves straight to combat, swinging 4 with Omnath at Sam, 6 at Justin, and 6 at Shelby. He then plays an Is It Boilerworks. He bounces back Snow-Covered Forest, makes another 2/2, and gains 4 life. He then just passes to Justin. Justin gets the feeling there's a Cyclonic Rift on the way, so he passes. On Justin's end step, Sam sacrifices Font of Fertility and lets Shelby have his turn while he's searching. And while he does miss another land drop, Shelby does get to play a Commander Sphere and pass to Sam. And on his turn, Sam casts a Sanctum of Shattered Heights, then activates Sisay to go get a Sanctum of Stone Fangs, and then passes to Ethan. On his end step, Ethan activates Sakura Tribe Scout to put in the Snow-Covered Forest, making another 2/2 and gaining 4 more life. Now on his turn, Ethan moves straight to combat again, swinging 10 at Shelby, Omnath at Justin, and 4 at Sam. Ethan then taps for 5 to cast Meloku, which enters tapped. He then plays a Windswept Heath, gaining 4 life, making another 2/2, and then passes turn. Justin plays a Battlefield Forge and passes to Shelby. Shelby unfortunately misses yet another land drop, but does get to cast Shalai and passes to Sam. And Sam decides to start his turn off by casting a Reprobation, enchanting Omnath. Ethan decides not to respond and just lets it happen. And I almost forgot, Sam gains 2 and everyone loses 2 to Sanctum of Stonefangs. Sam then decides to reactivate Sisay and ultimately decides to grab a Sanctum of Fruitful Harvest. Sam then passes to Ethan, and he has more end-step shenanigans. He pays 1 to bounce Snow-Covered Forest to his hand to make a 1/1. He then taps Sakura Tribe Scout to put it back in, getting another 2/2 zombie. He moves to combat once more, swinging 12 at Sam, 3 at Justin, and 4 at Shelby. Sam blocks one of the 2/2s and takes 10. And Shelby also blocks one of them, only taking 2. After that, Ethan, in a pretty good position and not wanting to cast into a board wipe, decides to just pass to Justin for now. And Justin starts his turn off by casting the Chop Down Adventure side of Giant Killer, targeting Sisay. Sisay is destroyed, then Justin casts Giant Killer. He then passes to Shelby. Shelby on his turn finally gets another land drop. Unfortunately, it is only a Tranquil Expanse. After that, he taps for 4 to cast an Arena Rector, then passes to Sam. And on Sam's turn, everybody loses 3 and Sam gains 3. He also makes 3 mana off of a shrine, and then taps for 4 more to cast Wargate, X is equal to 4. He searches his library and finds a Honden of Cleansing Fire. He then passes to Ethan, and would you believe me if I told you he had more end-step shenanigans? He taps Is It Boilerworks to activate Meloku, making another 1/1 bird and bouncing Boilerworks back to his hand. He then activates Sakura Tribe Scout to put the Boilerworks back into play, making another 2/2 zombie and bouncing a Snow-Covered Forest. Now on his turn, Ethan moves straight to combat once again, swinging 8 at Sam and 8 at Justin. They both take it. Now in his second main phase, Ethan taps for 4 to cast a Stone Cedar Hierophant. He then passes to Justin, and Justin just passes to Shelby. And Shelby, now finally getting land drops, plays a Plains. Then drops and extorts an Urza's Ruinous Blast, holding priority and sacrificing Commander Sphere. Shelby then swings for 3 with Shalai at Ethan and then passes to Sam, who is in a good position. On his turn, when his shrines go off, everyone loses a total of 4 life and Sam gains 12. He also makes 4 mana, taps for an extra 1, and casts Sigil of the Empty Throne. He then casts an ECD, getting a 4/4 Angel, and exiling Ethan's Meloku. He then passes to Ethan, and on his end step, Ethan fetches 3 times on his end step. Ethan finds an island, a Temur Triome, and a Temple Garden to the battlefield, and gets 3 triggers from Omnath. He gains 4, makes 4 mana, and everyone loses 4. He also makes 3 more 2/2 zombies. He then moves to combat, swinging 8 at Shelby and 2 at Justin. Justin, wanting to survive, terminates the 2/2 zombie. After this, Ethan casts a Scape Shift. He sacrifices 4 lands, finds a Valakut and 3 mountains. He bolts Sam 3 times, Omnath triggers, he gains 4, makes 4 mana, and everybody takes 4. This will kill Sam and Justin. Shelby is the only survivor. Ethan will also make 4 more 2/2 zombies. Ethan then passes to Shelby, and Shelby casts Lyra Dawnbringer on his turn. Shelby then moves to combat and swings for 4 in the air at Ethan. Ethan then Path to Exile Shalai on Shelby's end step, and is at this point Shelby decides to concede. Well, you guys, there it was. Pretty interesting game if you ask me. Ethan and Sam's decks proved to be really resilient even through board wipes, and unfortunately Shelby wasn't really able to cast much until later in the game. But that's how Magic is. It's a game of variance and chance. You win some, you lose some. I hope you guys enjoyed, and if you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. And also, leave us a comment down below letting us know what you thought. And if you haven't already, follow us on social media. Links will be in the description, along with the deck lists. But as always, you guys, have a smooth day.